Welcome to The Conversation. My name is Brendan Malone, and in this episode I want to talk about a recent tweet from Patton Oswalt where he criticised people for having vaccine hesitancy. So comedian and actor Patton Oswalt recently tweeted the following. When the polio vaccine dropped in 1955, people lined up to get it, and we were 2 years away from artificial satellites. Now in 2021, we carry external world brains in our pockets, and there's robots on Mars, and idiots think the vaccine is full of wizard poison. Now, for those who are wondering, the reason why I've blurred out and I'm not mentioning the C word, that problem that we've had since last February, that issue that's affected the whole entire planet that we've all been grappling with, and it's completely upended and changed life as we know it. Well, the reason I'm not going to mention that word is because this video is going onto YouTube, and it's a bit of a lottery at the moment as to whether or not your video will be blacklisted or possibly even banned for mentioning that word. It's anybody's guess. No one knows why videos are being treated that way, but they are. So I'm not going to mention that word specifically, but you all know what I'm talking about. The point is here that it's not really so much about that anyway. It's just about societal trust and societal hesitancy, really, to do what authorities are asking of people. That's the broader, bigger issue here. The issue of hesitancy to take a particular course of action, in this case related to getting vaccinated. So why is it that people would have this hesitancy? And there's something here you'll notice straight away about Patton Oswalt's tweet, and that is that he has set up a bit of a false dichotomy here. He's created two opposing groups when in actual fact I think he's completely failed to account for a third, and I think probably not inconsiderable number of people who aren't in the wizard magic group, who are conspiratorial about this at all, who just have hesitancy, who have questions and concerns that cause them to perhaps pull back. They're not anti-vax, they're just waiting and watching before they line up and get themselves vaccinated this time around. And I think it's understandable why that group would exist. I think it's completely unfair to assume that there's only two groups here. But let's leave that aside for a second, and I want to make a bit of a defence, and I want to perhaps not really so much defend that way of thinking, but mount an explanation that I think Patton Oswalt has completely failed to consider here in this little hot take for why there would be this widespread societal mistrust and why this actually exists in our modern era. So first of all, we've been through this crisis over the last 12 months plus now, and we know that this is a novel thing, and as a result, the advice from the top keeps changing. 1 minute it's do this, the next minute it's no, don't do that, do the exact opposite of what we were telling you to do just a couple of months ago. That's the reality of the situation that we have found ourselves in. And so it's understandable that in that sort of environment, people are sort of like, well, do I follow that advice this time around, or will even that advice to go and get myself twerked in the arm, will that change? I don't know. So it's understandable that that sort of thing affects people's decision making in regards to this issue. Secondly, there's the fact that everyone has seen this widely reported, and they know that a lot of drug manufacturers have pushed this product quickly onto the market. They know that the normal regulations have been waived because governments are really desperate to try and find a solution to this problem here, and so the normal processes have been sped up, and they also probably would have heard the news that for a lot of the manufacturers of this new drug, this new vaccine, the normal liabilities have been waived by governments. Now, most thinking people are probably going to ask themselves, well, if these things don't matter, so liability on the part of the drug company and the normal process of protocols that something has to go through before it gets put onto the market, if they don't matter this time, why do we normally expect them of vaccine and drug manufacturers? And most people are probably thinking to themselves, well, I think they do matter, and I have hesitancy because I'm not sure if the same protocols are being followed as strictly, and whether or not I should be concerned about this fact that this thing has quickly come onto the marketplace and the normal liabilities are being waived. I think it's understandable. There's probably people out there who remember and who know that there are drug companies who do have some pretty big mistakes and some very fatal and harmful mistakes on their record, where products that they have put out into the marketplace have not simply failed to deliver, but have actually done harm to people. I think people probably remember those kind of incidents. And so all of this surely has got to be considered when you would ask the question, well, why is it that people might have hesitancy this time around? But I think there's also something else here that Patton Oswalt has completely failed to take into account. And it's even bigger than that, and it's more widespread, and it's not just about vaccines, it's about societal trust. Trust on the part of the public in general, of institutions in general. You see, the thing is, despite the fact that corporations manufacture products and they try and sell those products to us with all sorts of marketing jargon and all sorts of spin about how this is a holistic, person-centered product, that seems to be the sort of, the thing of the day, ethical, person-centered, community-focused products. At the end of the day, people, I think, instinctively know that corporations don't exist for our well-being. They exist to make money by selling us stuff, and we all instinctively know now that the more money that's at stake, the more of a corrupting influence that can be when it comes to decision-making within a corporation. I think people also know instinctively now that governments, despite the fact that they would claim otherwise, they're not really as focused on our personal well-being as they are on their own political power and clinging on to that and keeping hold of that. And we've seen plenty of scandals, and even in recent decades, that highlight why governments and trustworthiness often don't go together. That's the sort of nature of politics. But there's something really big that happened after 1955, when you'd probably say that trust in government and institutions was at a high. And there's a couple of things that happened in the United States that make it understandable why today a lot of people would actually have mistrust. The first of those incidents happens in the late 60s and early 70s, and that is the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War affects really the baby boomers directly. They're the ones who are going off to actually fight in that war. And all of a sudden you have this situation for a lot of people, their trust in the government is stretched to breaking point because you've got a government that's sending them off to a foreign country to die in a war, or to be seriously maimed in that war, or to return home from that war as people who are not lauded and celebrated, but who are spat on in the streets, and often a lot of them coming back as drug addicts as well. And so for a lot of people, that event, that incident, all of a sudden completely blows out of the water any trust they had previously, and probably, I would say, as I said, at a pinnacle in the 1950s, in the government actually being invested in your well-being. This is very different from what was going on in World War II and this altruistic focus on fighting a battle to save the world from great evil. All of a sudden, this is a very, very different equation now, and it shatters a lot of trust. Now, around that same time, something else happens, and that is the whole Watergate incident. And here you have the presidency of the United States embroiled in this criminal scandal, the scandal involving a criminal act that goes all the way to the top. This is a trust-shattering event, probably like no other for a lot of people. They have come off the back of the era of Camelot, the Kennedys, and there was this sort of mythological mystique built up. The Kennedys were probably the closest thing that the United States has ever had to royalty, to a political royal family. And there was a lot of mythologizing of the Kennedys. And I think, I've said this to a lot of people over the years, I think that if JFK, if that assassination attempt had have been thwarted and he hadn't have been killed, I think that if he'd lived, then the political legacy would not have been as colourful and as lauded and celebrated. I think there would have been a lot more of a critical and rational analysis of that actual legacy and his personal moral failings, because I think the leadership and moral failings would have started to come to light and become a bit more stark and more apparent to people. But as a result of what happened there's a certain mythology that developed, and there's a sort of mystique about the Kennedys. And really, when you think about it, because they are masters of rhetoric, the Kennedy family, there's a sense of like, this is the pinnacle in the United States for trust in the government, and the idea that the government and our politicians are really working hard, and that they can bring this vibrant, new, world-changing, I guess, utopia-building way of doing things to politics. But that is all completely blown out the window and is completely destroyed when Watergate happens not long after that. And so it's understandable that we are now in a situation almost 70 years after the polio vaccine where generally, and there's a sort of a widespread distrust that exists in our society of institutions, of corporations, of our politicians and what they're saying and whether they really do have our best interests at heart. And I think Patton Oswalt's hot take has completely failed to take account of that. It's completely failed to consider why people would actually have distrust and mistrust today as a result of how things have changed in society. Can I suggest a better course of action? I think perhaps the better way forward is, what about if we just stop gloating? Whether you are someone who is choosing to wait and not get the vaccine, or whether you are someone who is choosing to line up and get it as quick as you can, how about we just stop looking down our nose at other people who have chosen differently? How about we just make our choice and stop condescendingly looking down our nose and passing judgment on other people who are making a different choice? And if we're someone who's chosen not to get the vaccine, we don't look condescendingly down our nose at those who are getting the vaccine. And if we're getting the vaccine, we don't do the condescending looking down our nose to people who are choosing not to get it. And perhaps we should also stop gloating about whatever position we hold. So if we're getting the vaccine, we're not gloating, hey, look at me, I'm one of the super cool dudes who's got the vaccine, unlike those other unenlightened dweebs out there. And if we're not getting the vaccine, let's stop gloating about that. Well, I'm not getting the vaccine because I'm not like those unenlightened sheep out there. So perhaps if we stopped with all the tribalism and all the condescending hot takes and actually took a step back and maybe considered the situation a bit more clearly and more critically, unlike what Patton Oswalt has done with this tweet, I would argue, then maybe, just maybe, we realise that things are a little bit more complex. This is not really as black and white as some people would like it to be or want it to be. And so therefore, we need to actually just lay off the judgment calls, carefully, critically evaluate the situation for ourselves, make a decision, and then just move on with life and everything will come out in the wash. Thanks for watching this episode of The Conversation. Don't forget to like, share, and give this video a thumbs up. That all helps the channel. And wherever you're watching, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit the little notifications bell as well. That way you'll get updated about every new piece of content that we publish. A huge thank you to everyone who is supporting us at patreon.com/leftfootmedia. For as little as $1 a month, you can help to ensure that this great content keeps happening. So that's patreon.com/leftfootmedia. As little as $1 a month or as much as you'd like to contribute. And a huge thank you, as I said, to everyone who made today's episode possible. You guys are awesome. I'll see you next time on The Conversation.